3 days before Christmas, Dr. Lauren Ellis received a call that quietly shattered something inside her. After a long shift at the hospital, she returned home, ready to join her family's annual holiday dinner in rural Vermont. Her suitcase was packed, gifts wrapped, even the homemade rosemary stuffing was ready, the same one everyone devoured each year, but never remembered she was the one who made it. Then came the call from her younger brother Blake. "Savannah's coming this year," he said casually, referring to his girlfriend. "She's really sensitive to energy. With your job and everything, maybe it's best if you sit this one out." He didn't call her a doctor, not a caregiver to the dying. Just ... heavy ... an hour later. Her mother chimed in, softer but sharper. "If you come, we might not answer the door." That was the moment Lauren realized she wasn't just uninvited. She was unwanted. No arguments. No tears, just a quiet, "Okay?" And with that, she did something no one expected. She stopped. She canceled the monthly financial support she'd been giving to her parents, froze Blake's car loan help, and for the first time in years, she chose herself not out of anger, but out of clarity. Lauren had always been the quiet backbone of the family. Until the moment they told her not to come home, she had spent most of her life believing that love meant being useful. She was the firstborn, the dependable one, the fixer. While her brother Blake basked in praise for every little effort to doodle on the wall was called expressive. A dropped-out college plan was celebrated as finding his path. Lauren was met with silence. Straight A's were tucked into drawers. Medical school acceptance was met with a half-hearted warning, "Don't burn out." She paid the bills no one acknowledged. She quietly wired money for her parents' overdue mortgage, replaced a broken water heater, and even bought Blake a new car battery when he called stranded by the roadside. Not once did she ask for thanks. She simply assumed that being indispensable meant she was also valued, but that assumption collapsed the day they told her not to come for Christmas. In the stillness that followed, Lauren didn't lash out. Instead, she observed, noticed, reflected. The pattern was clear. Her presence was taken for granted. Her absence was more convenient. It wasn't that she was too much. It was that they never really saw her, so she stopped. She paused the $800 monthly support, cut off the emergency fund. And though it stung, she didn't warn anyone. She didn't write a passive-aggressive message or call to explain. She simply withdrew with the same quiet grace she'd shown for years. That silence wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And for the first time in decades, Lauren found something they never gave her. Peace. It's the kind of peace that comes not from being needed, but from finally choosing to stop shrinking into roles that were never meant for her. Not the fixer, not the shadow behind the golden child, just herself. The absence of her help, over time, speak louder than anything she could have said. As Christmas came and went, Lauren Ellis found herself in a quiet apartment, alone, not with bitterness, but with a strange sense of clarity. The gifts she had wrapped remained untouched. The tree stood unlit. There were no angry posts, no emotional outbursts, just stillness. And for once, that stillness belonged to her. But peace didn't mean closure. The very next day, her phone buzzed, not with apologies, but with accusations. "You ruined Christmas," her aunt said gently, confused. Lauren hadn't even been there. Then came the truth. Savannah, Blake's girlfriend, the very reason Lauren had been uninvited, had stumbled upon an old photo of her in the family living room. She recognized Lauren not as Blake's sister, but as Dr. Ellis, the woman who had once stood by her grandmother's bedside when every other physician had given up. And in that instant, the illusion shattered. Savannah realized that the same woman her boyfriend's family had mocked, too serious, too intense. Basically, death in a pantsuit was the one who had shown more humanity than all of them combined. The one who had held her grandmother's hand and reminded her she still mattered. Savannah left quietly, without a scene. but her absence echoed louder than any argument. Days later, her social media post would confirm what Lauren had long suspected. Kindness doesn't always come from the ones who claim to love you. Sometimes it comes from those who've seen you at your best when your own family refused to. And in that moment, Lauren wasn't just remembered. She was seen not as a role, not as a shadow, not as a burden, but as a woman who mattered deeply, unmistakably, and finally, asterisk. 2 days after Christmas, Lauren's phone rang again. This time, not with cold indifference, but with desperation. Her mother's voice was sharp, rattled. "I don't know what you said to her, but now your brother is a mess." Savannah blocked his number. She posted something online. She tagged your photo. The irony was bitter. After years of being dismissed, overlooked, and silenced, Lauren was now the one they needed. Not for love, not for reconnection, but for damage control. They asked her to reach out to Savannah, to smooth things over, clarify that there were no bad intentions. Suddenly, Lauren had been promoted to the family's PR department. Her mother pleaded, "His name's being dragged in those New York art circles. He's being blacklisted." Lauren didn't laugh, but inside she felt the absurdity of it all. The same people who erased her presence were now begging for her voice, her validation, just so they could clean up the mess they had made. She didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because she finally understood. Her value was never about being useful to them. It wasn't her responsibility to preserve their reputation while they dismantled her character behind closed doors. When she read Savannah's public post, it wasn't a scandal. It was truth. A quiet, dignified truth that exposed what years of trying to keep the peace had hidden. Savannah had seen Lauren for who she truly was: a compassionate doctor, a quiet protector, a woman whose kindness had rippled far beyond her family's narrow lens. And in that moment, Lauren realized she didn't need to fix anything, not this time that night. Just before bed, Lauren listened to a voicemail that would stay with her far longer than the silence of Christmas morning. It wasn't from her mother or Blake or even her father. It was from Savannah. Her voice was quiet, vulnerable, real. "I got your number from your aunt. I hope that's okay. I didn't know who you were, not really. But I recognized your photo. You treated my grandmother years ago. She still talks about you. She said ... you changed everything." Lauren sat still, listening. Twice, then again. The words weren't dramatic or rehearsed. They were honest. Savannah hadn't reached out to mend what her boyfriend's family had broken. She didn't ask for favors. She didn't offer shallow apologies. She simply spoke the truth. And in doing so, she gave Lauren something her own family never had: acknowledgement. Savannah remembered Lauren not as too serious or too much, but as a steady hand in the darkest of moments. The woman who stood beside a dying patient with grace and quiet strength. Someone who didn't just do her job, but gave her soul to it. It was the kind of recognition that healed more than 1,000 forced apologies ever could. 3 days later, a small package arrived. Inside, a handwritten letter on thick, smudged paper. Savannah wrote about her grandmother's resilience, her weekly yoga, her fondness for farmers markets. But most of all, she wrote about Lauren. About the young doctor who had looked her grandmother in the eye and said, "You're not done yet." Lauren framed the letter and hung it beside her desk. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Not to her family. Not to anyone. Because someone who had nothing to gain had seen her. And that was enough. Lauren thought the storm had passed. The framed letter from Savannah sat peacefully beside her desk. A quiet reminder that her worth had finally been recognized. But then an email landed in her inbox. Asterisk. An email landed in her inbox. The subject line read, "Let's reset things." It was signed by all three, her mother, her father, and Blake. They didn't apologize. Not really. Instead, they spoke in vague language. Emotions ran high. "We regret how things may have been perceived." It was the kind of apology people give when they're afraid of consequences, not when they feel genuine remorse. Buried beneath their passive wording was the real reason they reached out. They wanted Lauren to convince Savannah to take down her viral post, not for Lauren's sake, but to protect Blake's reputation in the art world. When she didn't respond, they escalated. Her father contacted one of her hospital administrators. He falsely suggested that she was emotionally unstable. He tried to undermine her career after decades of ignoring her accomplishments. Then came the extended family texts. Half-truths crafted to frame Lauren as the problem, the source of all the chaos. Cousins who hadn't spoken to her in years sent hollow check-ins and yoga retreat vouchers, assuming she was going through something, and finally, they showed up. At her door, with soft voices and hopeful eyes asking to talk, but Lauren didn't move. She understood now. They weren't there for her. They were there for the version of her who used to clean up their messes. And that version no longer lived. There, she said one word. No. Then she closed the door, not with anger, but with peace. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is not extending the olive branch or protecting the soil in which it grows. Lauren didn't open the door again. She didn't flinch when the guilt trips came knocking. She simply returned to her desk, where Savannah's handwritten letter hung framed, gentle, quiet, and powerful. It reminded her of something she had nearly forgotten. The people who see you clearly are rarely the ones shouting the loudest. For years, Lauren had poured herself into others, into aging patients who had been overlooked, into a family who took her kindness for granted, into a younger brother who never once repaid what he borrowed. She had mistaken being needed for being loved. But when her silence finally spoke louder than any words, it became clear who truly valued her. Savannah had no reason to reach out. Obligation, no family ties. But she did because she had seen something real in Lauren. Strength wrapped in compassion. Dignity without demand. Her words didn't try to fix the past. They simply said, I see you, and you matter. That moment changed everything. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop performing for those who never clapped and start listening to those who've been watching quietly, respectfully, all along. As Lauren filed her patient notes that evening, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Not bitterness, not sadness, but peace. A quiet exhale after years of holding her breath. She didn't need validation from those who had always minimized her. She had become her own witness. And in doing so, she finally wrote the ending to a story they never truly understood. Because sometimes being invisible to the wrong people is exactly what makes you visible to the right ones. Asterisk, as Lauren sat at her desk that quiet Sunday afternoon, she realized something profound. Her silence wasn't a retreat. It was a boundary. Her family had spent years measuring her against Blake, the charming son, the artist, the one they could boast about, and Lauren. She was the helper, the fixer, the quiet support beam they leaned on but never praised. They had always treated her care as duty, not devotion. Her financial help was expected. Her emotional labor was invisible. Her presence, at best, was tolerated. At worst, dismissed. But the moment she withdrew that unspoken support, everything changed. They didn't miss her. They missed what she gave. And when that giving stopped, the silence roared louder than any argument. Savannah's handwritten letter reminded Lauren why she had chosen her path. She hadn't entered medicine for glory. She didn't care for the elderly expecting praise. She did it because it mattered. Because people deserved dignity. And it wasn't her family's validation that proved her worth. It was the quiet acknowledgement from someone outside the frame, someone who saw the healer, not the heavy one. When her parents and brother knocked on her door hoping to reset the cycle, Lauren didn't waver. She simply said no. No to manipulation. No to emotional gaslighting. No to being the bandage for wounds they refused to admit they caused. She didn't say it in anger. She said it in truth. And for the first time, she didn't carry their disappointment. Because it wasn't hers to carry anymore in choosing herself. Lauren didn't abandon her family. She abandoned the version of herself who believed she had to earn their love by disappearing into their needs. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone whole, grounded, and finally seen on a quiet Sunday afternoon. As the winter light cast soft shadows across her living room, Lauren heard a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peeking through the peephole, she saw them, her mother, her father, and Blake, standing like ghosts from a life she no longer lived in. They didn't come empty-handed, but their faces told the real story. This wasn't about love or reconciliation. It was about damage control. "We just want to talk," her mother said softly. Her voice was carefully calibrated to disarm. But Lauren didn't move. She didn't open the door wide like she used to. She didn't rush to make it easier for them, because the version of Lauren who used to smooth everything over the fixer, the silent helper, was gone. They stood there, hoping she would cave, that she'd step back into their story, play the part that made everyone comfortable except her. But instead, Lauren looked at them calmly and said one word, firm and final. No. No apologies, no justifications, no performance. Then she closed the door. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she didn't feel guilt. She didn't feel regret. She felt power. The power of boundaries. The power of no longer being the cleanup crew for people who only noticed her when their own world started to crumble. Lauren made herself a cup of tea and sat down at her desk, where Savannah's handwritten letter now hung in a soft wooden frame. A reminder that not everyone needs history to recognize worth. Some people simply see you, fully and without condition. That single word at the door wasn't rejection. It was release, a quiet reclaiming of peace, the end of a chapter. Where love had always been a one-way street, in the stillness of her apartment, Lauren finally understood something profound. She was never meant to fit into a mold her family carved. Out of their own comfort, she was not too much, not too serious, not too intense. She was simply herself, and that was enough. Looking at Savannah's letter framed beside her desk, she realized she didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to those who overlooked her. Not to the ones who only saw her value. When they needed something, she wasn't born to keep the peace or make others feel at ease. She was born to heal. To sit with people in their most fragile moments. Oh, to bring dignity where it had been lost. That was her calling. That was her purpose. And for the first time, she felt whole without their approval. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from being accepted, but from no longer needing to be. You don't have to shrink yourself to be worthy of love. If you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or undervalued, remember this: your worth isn't measured by the people who fail to recognize it. It's defined by the lives you touch when no one is watching. Asterisk, if Lauren's story moved you, if you've ever had to choose peace over approval, we invite you to share your experience in the comments below. We would love to hear your story. And if you believe in the quiet strength of healing, in the courage it takes to choose yourself over the noise, consider subscribing to the channel. Because sometimes walking away isn't the end. It's the beginning of finally coming home to yourself.